Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The sun rose over the sprawling forests and jagged cliffs that formed the territory of the Midnight Stone Pack. The early morning light cast long shadows across a terrain thick with pine, oak, and whispering birch. A damp chill rode on the breeze that rustled the leaves, but already the heart of the pack was alive with activity. Young wolves, still awkward in their half-grown limbs, chased one another across a patch of dew-laden grass, while older pack members busied themselves with preparations for the day. At the edge of the main clearing, warriors stretched and readied their muscles, anticipating another training session or, if misfortune befell, a border skirmish with rogues. Among these warriors stood Rhodri, known for his relentless drive in battle and the quiet intensity that lingered in his eyes. He was tall, with a sharply defined build that spoke of countless hours perfecting every fighting style known to werewolves. Thick scars on his forearms told stories of vicious encounters with rival packs and savage rogues who roamed the outskirts of the territory. His presence commanded the respect of those around him, not just because he was an alpha warrior by rank, but because he had earned that rank through countless victories. Unlike some of his fellow warriors who boasted of their conquests in loud, boisterous tones, Rhodri rarely spoke of his accomplishments. He did not need to. The stories others told of his prowess carried enough weight that he did not have to advertise his own legend. As the morning training commenced, the large clearing filled with the sounds of snapping twigs underfoot and the breathy growls of werewolves sparring in human form. Muscles bunched as pairs circled one another, testing reflexes and agility. Dust rose and caught the beams of early sunshine, creating a swirling haze around them. Rhodri moved fluidly in the ring, sparring with two younger warriors simultaneously. His unwavering focus was evident in the way his gaze locked on each opponent, analyzing their slightest movements. One warrior lunged with a low sweep aimed at Rhodri's legs, but Rhodri dodged it easily, pivoting and landing a sharp strike to the young wolf's ribs. The onlookers cheered at his precision, some clapping in admiration. The second attacker attempted to catch Rhodri off guard from behind, but a quick glance over Rhodri's shoulder was enough for him to twist and clamp a hand around the attacker's wrist, spinning him onto the ground. A hush settled for the briefest moment, then more applause and appreciative whistles broke through. As the crowd dispersed to continue individual drills, another prominent figure moved to stand beside Rhodri. Talia, a formidable she-wolf with sinewy arms and a sharp gaze, was considered the most accomplished female warrior in the pack. She wore her authority like a mantle, proud and defiant. A deep scar ran across her left cheek, a memento from a rough battle that she often boasted about. Talia offered a quick nod of greeting. She and Rhodri had grown up side by side, competing in every trial of strength. Their matched abilities had spawned a shared reputation as the pack's deadliest duo. Onlookers had long whispered that these two would someday become mates. Their union, many believed, would produce the strongest bloodline the Midnight Stone Pack had seen in decades. "Good form," Talia remarked, her voice carrying a restrained admiration as she surveyed the younger wolves groaning and rubbing their sore ribs. "You never miss a chance to show them how far they have yet to go." There was a faint smile on her lips, a softness that she rarely offered to anyone else. "They need to learn," Rhodri answered, brushing some dust off his forearms. He could still feel the faint twinge of old wounds, the subtle reminders of how high the stakes could be in true battle. "I'd rather they taste a fraction of real pain in training than a lethal blow out there." Talia nodded, understanding the responsibilities of being a warrior. "We've heard rumors of rogues prowling the western border," The patrol returned late last night, and they confirmed fresh tracks. Alpha Byron wants you to lead a small team and scout that region. And she paused and cast him a sideways glance. He's trusting you with this mission because he knows you won't fail. Rhodri's jaw tightened slightly. He respected the pack's alpha leader, a firm but fair older wolf with a graying muzzle, but he also recognized the weight of that trust. Failure was not an option. He gave Talia a brief nod of acknowledgement. Gather who you need. We'll leave in an hour. As Talia departed to make preparations, Rhodri exhaled quietly. He felt a tension in his chest, an unnamed burden that had grown heavier over time. He understood the expectation that seemed to hover in the air whenever he was near Talia. The entire pack had placed hopes on a mating that would strengthen the warrior lineage. And in all fairness, Talia was strong and capable, a true force on the battlefield, yet something in Rhodri's heart remained unsettled. It was not that he disliked her. On the contrary, he respected her deeply. But the flutter of true longing, that inexplicable sense of fate pulling two souls together, had never sparked for him, at least not with Talia. Shaking off the thought, he turned to double-check his supplies for the upcoming patrol. Leather straps secured his boots, a custom-made quiver of throwing daggers sat against his thigh, and at the small of his back he carried a short blade crafted by the most skilled blacksmith in the region. Satisfied that all was in order, Rhodri gathered a few warriors, including Talia, and within the hour they were off, racing through the forest in swift, bounding strides that covered ground quickly. Their heightened senses allowed them to detect the faintest scents and sounds, all vital for what was to come. They soon reached the western border, a rocky terrain where tall pines gave way to sharp ridges. A cool wind skimmed the mountain faces, and distant birds circled overhead, cawing as though warning of trouble. Rhodri signaled his group to halt. Crouching, he found deep paw prints embedded in the soil at the base of a towering cedar. The spacing between the prints told him these were the tracks of large wolves, more than just a stray or two. Talia sniffed the air, her nose wrinkling in distaste. She locked eyes with Rhodri and nodded. This was too fresh to be anything but a concerted infiltration. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the nearby brush. Rhodri tensed, listening for movement, as Talia and the others readied themselves. Seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness. Then the undergrowth parted, and 3 rogue wolves lunged into sight, fur bristling and eyes wild with the gleam of desperation that rogues often carried. The fight erupted in a flurry of fur and fangs as half-shifted werewolves closed the distance. Talia and 2 pack warriors engaged one rogue, attempting to corral it away from the group. Another rogue aimed directly for Rhodri, launching itself at his chest with claws extended. He sidestepped in a quick burst of speed, hooking an arm around the creature's midsection and hurling it against a boulder. The impact echoed through the ravine. The rogue tried to scramble back to its feet, but Rhodri's blade was already in hand. He sliced forward, not to kill, but to injure enough to neutralize the threat. The rogue let out a feral snarl, but its front leg buckled under the blow. A moment later, the 3rd rogue darted in from behind, jaws snapping. Rhodri twisted, feeling sharp teeth graze his shoulder. Pain flared, and his vision momentarily blurred with the surge of adrenaline. He wrestled the rogue to the ground, feeling the slick warmth of blood on his skin. Talia rushed in to assist, but by then, Rhodri had pinned the creature. The pack warriors subdued the remaining rogues, forcing them into a retreat or a state of wounded surrender. When the clamor subsided, Talia turned to Rhodri with genuine concern, noticing the red staining his shoulder. "You're hurt," she said bluntly, moving toward him. "It's nothing," Rhodri insisted, although the pain throbbed in a deep pulse. I've had worse. Better not let it fester, Talia countered, making a quick motion at one of the younger wolves. Go fetch a stretcher. We can't have infection setting in on him. She attempted to help him stand, but Rhodri shrugged off her assistance. He respected Talia, but he was not fond of appearing vulnerable in front of her or anyone else. They made their way back to the heart of the Midnight Stonepax village by late afternoon. Several huts, fashioned from thick timbers, lined the pathways that wove around a large communal fire pit. Smoke curled lazily into the air from a couple of chimneys. Children darted around, pausing in wide-eyed awe to see the warriors returning, especially when they noticed the streaks of blood caked on Rhodri's shoulder. Some older pack members greeted them with shouts of relief or quiet murmurs of respect. The group rushed him to the healer's dwelling, a large lodge on the eastern side of the clearing. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the mingled scents of dried herbs, antiseptic bombs, and the subtle tang of healing potions concocted by the caretaker Omegas. The main room featured wooden shelves stacked with bandages, jars of salve, and carved bowls that held various poultices. Soft furs lay across the ground where injured wolves could rest. That was where Rhodri found himself guided. An Omega named Lena, a soft-spoken caretaker with gentle brown eyes, emerged from the back. She wore a simple tunic and carried herself with a quiet confidence, as though her tasks here were as vital as any warrior's duty on the battlefield. She had tended to countless wounded before, but rarely had she encountered the pack's fiercest champion in her care. She looked at Rhodri, eyes flickering with empathy. He was a looming presence, even seated on the cot. She swallowed her nerves and approached with a mixture of caution and concern. I need to see the wound, Lena said softly, placing a tray of linen wraps and salves beside him. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried a calm authority that gently encouraged compliance. Rhodri gave the briefest nod and stripped off his torn tunic. The gash on his shoulder was still oozing blood, the edges ragged from the rogue's bite. Lena inhaled quietly, then set to work cleaning it with a gentle but thorough hand. The sting of antiseptic made Rhodri's muscles tighten, and he let out a slow exhale. He was accustomed to pain, but not used to someone tending him with such a gentle approach. While she worked, Mina's thoughts ran in a tumult. She remembered glimpses of Rhodri over the years, always from the periphery of gatherings or ceremonies. He was legendary in the pack, practically unstoppable in combat, but she had also heard hushed tales about how he often trained alone, shunning too much attention. The stark difference between her station as an Omega caretaker and his station as a revered alpha warrior had made her assume they would never exchange words beyond polite greetings. Now, the reality of his flesh and blood in her hands made her heart flutter with an emotion she could not fully name. She tried to focus on her task, meticulously dressing the wound, smoothing the bandages, and tying them off with a practiced efficiency. I appreciate your skills, Rhodri said eventually, allowing a hint of gratitude to color his otherwise flat tone. He was not adept at conversation, particularly not with someone so gentle and unassuming. His entire life had been about conflict, strategy, and duty. Still, he was not ungrateful. You have a steady hand. Lena glanced at him, her cheeks warming under his direct gaze. Thank you. I have plenty of practice, considering how often the warriors come back from missions with injuries. She finished tying the bandage and gently patted it, checking for security. The salve I used should help with the healing. But you must try to rest tonight. If the wound opens again, infection could weaken you. Rhodri grunted in acknowledgement. He was not used to instructions to rest. Every muscle in his body was inclined toward constant vigilance. If there's a threat out there, rest might not be an option. Lena lowered her gaze. Still, you'll be stronger if you give yourself time to recover. A peculiar stillness hung between them for a moment. Lena's eyes flickered with genuine concern, and Rhodri, despite his stoic facade, found himself unexpectedly moved by her earnest care. He offered a curt nod, promising nothing, yet acknowledging her point. Their moment was interrupted as Talia strode in. She took one look at Rhodri's bandaged shoulder, then flicked her gaze at Lena with an expression that bordered between annoyance and grudging respect for the Omega's skill. "You good to walk?" Talia asked, focusing back on Rhodri. "I'm fine," Rhodri responded, rising from the cot in a smooth motion that belied the pain coursing through him. He almost staggered as a wave of dizziness threatened to unsteady him, but he caught himself and feigned indifference. "I just need some air." Talia stepped closer, as though ready to support him. But he brushed past, standing tall. She opened her mouth to speak, to perhaps insist he remain under care, but she refrained. Instead, she jerked her head, indicating she would follow him outside. Before they left, Rhodri glanced over his shoulder at Lena, a fleeting look of something like gratitude in his eyes. Lena offered a small smile, her hands clasped at her waist, watching him go with a glimmer of quiet thoughtfulness. Outside, the sky had shifted to a late afternoon haze, the sun slipping slowly toward the horizon. Some of the pack's children rushed to greet Talia, enthralled by any dramatic retelling of her skirmish. Talia, however, waved them off, her attention fixated on Rhodri. She caught up to him near a large oak tree that stood to the side of the main clearing. "We need to figure out what those rogues were after," she said, arms crossed. "They don't usually come that close to our territory without a reason." Rhodri leaned against the tree, ignoring the subtle flare of pain in his shoulder. "They're probably testing boundaries, seeing if we've grown soft." His voice hardened as he recalled the desperation in the rogue's eyes. "We'll report to Alpha Byron, and the next step is his decision. But you know we'll have to keep patrolling." Talia nodded, her gaze drifting to the fresh bandage peeking from under Rhodri's shirt. "You sure you're all right?" she asked in a quieter tone. He gave a tight nod. "I'll manage." She studied him for a moment. "Look, you've built a reputation of enduring anything, but even you need time to heal. The pack is counting on you, but that doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself every time you get a wound." Rhodri exhaled, feeling tension coil in his chest. He understood what she was saying, yet the drive in him to always be prepared for the next threat was ingrained. "I won't push myself to the point of uselessness, if that's what you're worried about." Her gaze turned more assessing. "And what about everything else the pack expects of you? You know people are talking about our potential union." She spoke the last words carefully, as though each syllable was weighed before leaving her lips. He clenched his jaw. That unspoken subject had hovered between them for years. He hesitated, searching for an honest answer. "We are the pack's strongest warriors. I understand that a bond between us might be seen as strategic. But he paused, uncertain how to articulate what gnawed at him. "I need time," he said finally, letting the words slip out. Talia gave a brisk nod. "Fine, but we don't have all the time in the world. Alpha Byron will expect an announcement soon, especially now that we're dealing with heightened rogue activity. Our lineage is important for the pack's future." She turned away, dismissing any further conversation on the subject, leaving Rhodri alone with the swirling conflict in his mind. He watched as the evening light cast long shadows across the clearing. He saw couples laughing softly, elders recounting stories around a small campfire, and the general bustle of pack life continuing on. Sometimes he felt like an observer, always outside, looking in. A soft rustling from behind made him turn. Lena emerged from the healer's lodge, looking a bit unsure. She seemed on the brink of retreating when she noticed his gaze upon her. Taking a slow breath, she approached with that same gentle step. "I just wanted to make sure you're not feeling lightheaded or anything," she explained, holding a small clay bottle. "This tincture can help ease the pain and promote healing from inside." Rhodri accepted the bottle, turning it over in his hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll use it." She nodded, lingering for a moment. It was unusual for an Omega caretaker to engage too much with an Alpha warrior outside of necessary medical treatments. There was a social hierarchy that typically kept their worlds apart. Still, her empathy for her patients transcended those boundaries, and she sensed an invisible weight pressing on him. She nearly asked if he was all right, but then remembered that a caretaker pried only when invited. Instead, she simply dipped her head in a respectful nod and walked away. He watched her go, an unspoken swirl of curiosity and appreciation in his expression. There was something about her gentleness that contrasted so starkly with the rest of his life. He had spent years surrounded by Talia's steel, the pack's relentless demands, and the brutal reality of warfare. In Lena's presence, for a brief moment, the crushing intensity in his chest felt just a little lighter. That night, Rhodri lay on a cot in the warriors' barracks. He could hear the breathing of the other fighters, many in human form, some partway shifted for comfort. Moonlight streamed in through a high window, illuminating the dust motes that floated in the still air. Sleep did not come easily. His thoughts wove between recollections of the day's battle, the biting pain in his shoulder, and the memory of Lena's soft voice. He thought of Talia too, of the closeness they once had as cubs, racing through the forest, learning to hunt side by side, forging the pack's future with their unstoppable drive. Now that closeness seemed overshadowed by expectations that neither of them had chosen to voice clearly. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Rhodri, and he drifted into a restless doze. He dreamed of running through the forest under a full moon, swift and powerful, with the shadows of other wolves racing behind him. In the distance, a figure with gentle brown eyes beckoned him, but the figure was enveloped in soft light. The dream seemed to tug at his heart with a sense of longing that was both confusing and exhilarating. In that fleeting dreamscape, the responsibility of his position fell away, and he was simply a wolf following a call that resonated deep within. By dawn, he rose with a grimace, testing the wound on his shoulder. The bandage had stayed in place. He pressed a hand to it and winced, but it was manageable. Outside, the pack was already stirring, the echo of howling in the distant hills reminding everyone that they were guardians of a vast territory. After a brief meal in the communal dining area, Rhodri set off to meet Alpha Byron, determined to report yesterday's findings and plan their next move. The Alpha's lodge was a sturdy structure built near the center of the pack's settlement, adorned with carved symbols representing unity, loyalty, and strength. Inside, an older wolf sat behind a wooden table etched with the territory's map. Gray streaked his hair, and deep lines creased the corners of his eyes. Despite the aging in his features, he possessed a commanding aura that few dared to defy. "Rhodri," the Alpha greeted, inclining his head. "I heard about the skirmish. Tell me everything." Rhodri recounted the incident in detail, emphasizing the rogue wolves' number and determination. "They either want to test us or find a weakness," he concluded. "We subdued them, but this likely won't be the last encounter." Alpha Byron steepled his fingers, contemplating. "We must strengthen border patrols. Also, we have to be sure our pack morale remains high." With any sign of vulnerability, rogues can sense an opening. Rhodri nodded. We can manage that. I'll coordinate with Talia to set rotating shifts, at least until we determine if this is an organized incursion or not. A shadow flickered across Alpha Byron's expression. Good. And, Rhodri, he began, weighing his words, the pack looks to you not just as a warrior, but as a potential future leader. You know there is talk of you and Talia uniting. Our people see it as a sign of stability and promise, especially in uncertain times. I won't force you, but I want you to consider the importance of your bond. Sometimes duty outweighs personal preference. Rhodri's jaw tightened, the internal struggle evident. He respected the Alpha. He acknowledged the logic behind a union with Talia. And yet, a whisper inside him resisted. He remained silent, and the Alpha did not push further, simply letting his final words linger in the charged space. After he left the lodge, Rhodri tried to immerse himself in the business of training younger recruits, hoping that physical action would clear his mind. He supervised sparring matches, corrected stances, and drilled them on agility exercises. The ache in his shoulder flared occasionally, reminding him of the precarious line between strength and vulnerability. At midday, he caught sight of Lena in the distance, gathering plants near the edge of the forest. An elder caretaker stood beside her, pointing out which herbs were best for certain injuries. At one point, Lena bent down to pick a cluster of small white flowers, her face radiating a quiet focus. Rhodri found himself pausing in his explanation to a young warrior, momentarily distracted. A flicker of warmth brushed through him, and he quickly swallowed it down, turning back to the training. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Talia approached Rhodri, requesting he join her on a short patrol around the eastern perimeter, an area less traveled but still part of the territory's defense. He agreed, wanting to ensure no vulnerability was overlooked. The forest was thick there, the leafy canopy filtering sunlight into patches of muted gold on the forest floor. The thick undergrowth made it easier for potential intruders to hide. They walked mostly in silence, listening for the rustle of wildlife, scanning the ground for tracks. After nearly an hour of quiet observation, Talia spoke. I notice the way your eyes linger on that caretaker, she said abruptly, her voice low, almost tense. The Omega who treated your wound. Rhodri cast her a sidelong glance, mind racing. He had not realized anyone else had caught that shift in his attention. Or perhaps Talia was simply more observant than most. I'm not sure what you mean, he replied, feigning a casual tone. She scoffed softly. I've known you a long time, Rhodri. You don't notice many people outside the context of training or missions. You noticed her. She jumped over a fallen log, graceful in her stride. Rhodri exhaled, unsure how to respond. He did not want to lie to Talia, but he also did not want to stoke confrontation. She's a caretaker, Talia. She helped with my injury, that's all. Talia's expression betrayed a hint of bitterness, quickly suppressed. I see the tension in your face whenever someone brings up our potential mating. If you're feeling something else, for someone else, that could complicate things. He stopped walking, turning to face her. His broad shoulders tensed, as though bracing for an argument. I haven't made any commitments, he said evenly, though his eyes flashed. And neither have you. He let out a slow breath, trying to speak calmly. I respect you. You're one of the best warriors this pack has. But I'm not going to lie and say I felt that deep bond everyone expects. Talia's gaze softened slightly. She seemed torn between frustration and a reluctant understanding. It's not easy for me either, she admitted. But the pack sees us as the future. Our bloodlines could strengthen the next generation, and that's not a light responsibility." She paused, eyes flicking to the dense forest canopy above them. "We have to decide soon, because ignoring it only breeds more rumors." He swallowed the knot forming in his throat. Deep in his heart, the notion of forging a mate bond just because it was deemed strategic made him uneasy. He wanted to feel certainty, a natural pull. For a wolf whose entire life had revolved around discipline and duty, longing for something genuine felt like an indulgence he was unsure he deserved. They continued their patrol in silence, both weighed down by unspoken tensions. Only when they reached the edges of the pack's settlement did Talia muster a wry smile. "Look, I'll speak to Alpha Byron. I'll tell him we need a bit more time. But be prepared, Rhodri, the pack might not wait forever." He nodded gratefully, aware that her stepping in would buy him at least a small reprieve from the pack elder's watchful eyes. As she walked away, he found himself alone with a swirl of conflicting emotions, none of which had been resolved by their conversation. That evening, he returned to the caretaker's lodge to have his bandage changed. Lena greeted him with a nod and led him to a bench near the back of the lodge. She carefully unwound the old dressing and examined the wound. Her gentle fingers probed the edges, ensuring there was no sign of infection. The slight pressure brought a hiss from Rhodri's lips, and she murmured an apology, brushing ointment onto the raw flesh. His gaze flicked to her face, noting how her brow knitted with concentration, and the faint shadow of a frown touched her lips as she worked. She was so unlike Talia, or any of the other warriors he knew. Everything about her spoke of a careful, nurturing nature, but beneath that quiet exterior, he sensed strength perhaps not the kind measured by claws and fangs, but a resilience that came from relentless compassion. As she finished applying a fresh bandage, he found himself speaking, the words leaving his mouth unbidden. "You're very skilled. Thank you." Again. She looked up, her eyes lit with that simple kindness. "Caretakers do their part to keep the pack healthy," she replied, stepping back. "It's not as grand as the warrior's role, but it's important in its own way." "It is," Rhodri affirmed, shifting slightly so he could face her more directly. "Sometimes I wonder if we place too much emphasis on battle and not enough on healing." She paused, seeming surprised by his statement. "Life in a werewolf pack can be harsh," she said carefully. "But we can't forget that we're more than just our fights. We have families. We have bonds. We have moments of calm where we share food and stories. That's why we need healing, to keep us from succumbing to the darkness of tea. Constant conflict." He listened, each word resonating in a part of his chest that he rarely acknowledged. Before he could think of a suitable reply, she bowed her head slightly and moved away to tend to another patient. Rhodri left the lodge with his thoughts whirling. He realized that each time he spoke with Lena, she offered a perspective so different from the war-driven mindset he was used to. He could not deny the quiet stirring in his spirit, a new awareness that there might be more to life than meeting the next threat with sharpened claws. That night, he did not sleep in the barracks. Instead, he found himself wandering to a secluded spot near a small stream that flowed behind the caretaker's lodge. The moon was bright, reflecting off the water's surface in shimmering patterns. The soft trickle of the stream was soothing, a lullaby to the beasts within every werewolf. Rhodri stood there, breathing in the scent of damp moss and night air, trying to reconcile the intense push of the pack's expectations with the gentle pull he felt whenever he remembered Lena's face. A rustle of movement caught his attention, and he noticed someone approaching. To his surprise, it was Lena herself, carrying a small basket of herbs. She froze when she saw him, clearly not expecting to find him here in the moonlit solitude. Sorry, she stammered quietly, dropping her gaze. I sometimes come here to gather herbs that grow well in the damp soil at night. Rhodri gave a slight shake of his head, gesturing that she need not apologize. I didn't mean to intrude, he said. I just needed to clear my head. She smiled softly, setting down the basket. For a moment, neither spoke. The silvery moonlight outlined the contours of her face, and Rhodri felt a strange sense of calm settling over him, as though the currents of the stream had gently swept away the day's burdens. Finally, he broke the silence. Does it ever trouble you, being an Omega caretaker in a pack so focused on strength and hierarchy? She hesitated, choosing her words with care. Sometimes, but every role is essential. Without us to tend the wounded, treat illnesses, or care for the young, the pack would suffer. I might not be in the front lines, but I know that what I do matters. Her conviction impressed him. You don't fear being overlooked, or used as little more than a tool? A hint of wistfulness crept into her gaze. A part of me does yearn for more. Some Omegas are content always being behind the scenes. But there are nights I dream of running with the warriors, facing the world head-on. Yet the pack structure is so old, so ingrained, that challenging it feels impossible. Rhodri found her honesty refreshing and oddly comforting. He had spent his entire life fitting into the alpha warrior mold. Show no weakness. Do not question your path. Achieve excellence and forge alliances for the good of the pack. But here was someone whose quiet bravery manifested not in violence, but in open-hearted dedication and acceptance of her role, all the while admitting the complexities of her own longings. They spoke softly by the stream for several minutes, the gentle hush of the night enveloping them. Lena explained how each herb in her basket could reduce inflammation or staunch bleeding. Rhodri shared a truncated version of a memory from his training days. How he had pushed himself to near collapse to beat Talia in a sparring match. They laughed lightly at the absurdity of it all, this relentless pursuit of strength. In that shared laughter, a warm undercurrent rippled between them. Something undefined yet undeniably present. An hour later, Lena excused herself to return to the lodge, mindful that she would need rest for the day's demands. Rhodri lingered, replaying their conversation in his mind. As he turned to depart, the moon drifted behind a wisp of cloud, cloaking the stream in darkness. Yet he felt a glimmer of light within, a small spark of curiosity, and the beginnings of what could only be described as hope. By the time Rhodri returned to the center of the pack settlement, most of the fires had died down, and the silhouettes of huts glowed faintly under the moon. He caught Talia's scent in passing, but she was nowhere in sight. For the first time in a long time, he did not actively search for her to discuss strategy or coordinate future training sessions. Instead, he carried his swirling thoughts about Lena into his night's rest, drifting into dreams laced with the soft hush of a forest stream and the gentle voice of a caretaker who saw more to life than just the next battle. In the days that followed, the tension at the borders remained, with occasional sightings of rogues. Rhodri and Talia doubled their efforts, scouting, training, reinforcing the pack's watch. Despite the ongoing threat, Rhodri found small moments to cross paths with Lena, whether during bandage changes or brief encounters around the settlement. Their conversations were short and often confined to necessary health updates, yet both felt a growing awareness simmering beneath each exchange. The rest of the pack began to whisper about Rhodri's visits to the caretaker's lodge. Gossip traveled quickly among the huts and tents. Some claimed he was simply ensuring his wound did not hamper him in battle. Others speculated that perhaps the legendary warrior was nursing a deeper injury in his soul that only soft-spoken compassion could heal. But no one said anything openly to challenge him. He was too revered, and also too intimidating to confront directly. One evening, after a particularly taxing day of training new recruits and patrolling the outskirts, Rhodri found himself at the lodge again. Lena greeted him with a look of surprise, but she quickly prepared fresh salve and asked him to sit. He complied, removing his shirt to reveal that the old bandage had come loose. She worked in silence at first, applying the ointment and rewrapping his shoulder. She noticed that the bite mark, though healing well, still bore the tooth imprints. A lump of worry formed in her throat at the sight. When she finished, she hesitated, then spoke softly. "You know, if that bite had gone any deeper, you could have suffered severe nerve damage. You really were close to something terrible." Rhodri looked at her, noting the serious glimmer in her eyes. "It didn't, though. I'm alive and capable of defending the pack." She swallowed, a flicker of emotion crossing her features. "Yes, but your life shouldn't always teeter on that edge. You matter too much to be so reckless." He was taken aback. In all his years, few had ever voiced genuine concern for his personal well-being separate from the pack's needs. His family was gone, taken in a raid when he was young, and Talia, or the other warriors, always framed concern around practicality. Staying alive was important for the good of the pack. Lena's words suggested something else. She believed he was important, not just as a warrior, but as an individual. He cleared his throat. "I'm used to risk. It's all I've known." She lowered her gaze, tying off the bandage with gentle care. "Maybe that's why you carry a restlessness inside you. Because you've never seen another way." They locked eyes for a moment, the silence charged with unspoken thoughts. In that flicker of time, Rhodri felt the edges of his carefully constructed walls weaken, allowing a sliver of vulnerability to show. He reached out and lightly touched her hand, a tentative gesture loaded with questions he was not fully prepared to ask. She did not pull away. Instead, she looked at him in a way that made his heartbeat quicken, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. Then, recalling where they were, she discreetly moved her hand back, her cheeks warming slightly. Before either could speak, another caretaker called Lena's name from the adjoining room. She excused herself, and Rhodri was left alone on the cot, his breathing unsteady. Never had he imagined that an Omega caretaker, someone gentle and unassuming, could cause such turmoil in his chest. Yet there it was, a steady drumbeat of possibility. As Rhodri left the lodge, he caught sight of Talia standing across the clearing, arms folded, her gaze unmistakably fixed on him. The flicker of anger and confusion in her eyes was evident even from a distance. The look was not lost on Rhodri, and he knew a confrontation was brewing, one that would force him to face a decision he had been putting off for far too long. Chapter 2. The following morning dawned overcast and cool, the sky layered in pale gray clouds that threatened a downpour. The pack stirred with a heightened sense of tension, likely a reflection of the precarious atmosphere that had settled after the rogue attack. Rhodri was up before most, rousing a small group of warriors to join him in a sunrise patrol. Through the dew-soaked forest, they found nothing unusual, just the distant tracks of deer and a few signs that smaller wildlife had foraged in the night. They returned to the pack's settlement around mid-morning, greeted by the clamor of daily bustle, pups scampering after each other, elders tending to chores, and caretakers organizing freshly harvested herbs. As Rhodri entered the main clearing, Talia approached with determined strides, her expression tight. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, gesturing for him to follow her into an alcove behind the Alpha's lodge. The stone walls, carved with ancient runes, offered a semblance of privacy from prying eyes. He folded his arms, bracing himself for what was coming. "All right," he responded, trying to keep his voice calm. She squared her shoulders, jaw set. "I'm not blind. The pack sees your visits to the caretaker's lodge, the looks you exchange with that Omega. You've never been this attentive to any caretaker before. People are starting to talk, and more than that, the elders are starting to question your intentions." Rhodri's chest tightened. He had never faced Talia's temper in such a personal context. They had argued before over battle strategies, training regimens, and who deserved to lead a particular mission, but this was different. This was about something deeply personal, something entangled with the pack's future. "What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly, his eyes narrowing. She let out a long breath, frustration warring with vulnerability. "I want you to be honest, with me, and with yourself. Are you truly interested in an Omega caretaker?" She paused, her tone growing sharper. "Because the entire pack is expecting us to mate. To be the next pillar of strength that upholds this territory. If you have no intention of fulfilling that, we need to address it. Now." His jaw clenched. "Talia, we've been friends and comrades for years, but that doesn't automatically mean we're destined to mate. Do I care for you? Yes. As a warrior, as someone who's fought alongside me. But there's a difference between respect and a bond that resonates in your very soul." For a moment, the harsh lines on Talia's face softened. She seemed as though she might say something conciliatory. Then her pride and the weight of tradition reasserted themselves. She straightened, flicking her gaze away. "You're jeopardizing our pack's hopes. And for what? An Omega who cannot fight by your side in the same way?" A spark of anger flared in Rhodri's eyes. "Is that all that matters to you, Talia? That your mate be able to fight as fiercely as you do? Because there's more to life in this pack than war. There's comfort, healing, care. Those are not weaknesses. It's just another kind of strength." She stood there, silent for a beat, the muscles in her jaw working. Finally, she nodded curtly. "Fine. If that is what you truly believe, tell Alpha Byron. Because he's expecting an announcement about our union soon. And if you don't speak up, I will." With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Rhodri with the pounding of his pulse echoing in his ears. He let out a shuddering breath, aware that the next few days would bring a reckoning. For years he had believed that if a mate bond was to happen with Talia, it would manifest naturally. But the intense longing he felt around Lena was unlike anything he had experienced with Talia. That reality was undeniable, and if he continued to ignore it, he would condemn himself and Talia to a lifeless union built on duty alone. Gathering himself, he made his way to the training grounds. It was a wide area of trampled earth, lined with racks of wooden swords and real steel for advanced fighters. Younger wolves practiced under the watchful eye of older warriors, shadows dancing in the wan morning light. With clipped instructions, Rhodri guided the novices through drills, forcing his personal turmoil into the background of his mind. He needed to focus on this moment, on ensuring these recruits gained the discipline they needed to become the next line of defense. Yet, as the session wore on, he caught himself scanning the clearing, half hoping to spot Lena going about her tasks. A flicker of guilt lashed him. He could not fully embrace his feelings for her without acknowledging the storm it would unleash, both for Talia and for the pack. After training, he retreated to the warriors' barracks to wash up. Stepping out of the small washing area, his shoulder throbbing dully, he spotted one of the younger caretakers waiting by the doorway. She bowed her head respectfully. "Rhodri, "The caretaker named Lena asked me to bring you this," she said, extending a small pouch of herbal compresses. "It might help soothe the pain in your shoulder when you're not able to stop by the lodge." He took the pouch, a tingle running through him at Lena's thoughtful gesture. "Thank you," he murmured, and the young caretaker excused herself. Inside the pouch, the faint scent of chamomile and comfrey reminded him of Lena's gentle presence. Without warning, a dozen images flashed through his mind. Lena bending over his wound, her patient smile, the way she listened so intently to every word he spoke by the stream that night. A faint shiver of realization coursed through him, heavier than ever. He wanted more of that presence in his life, more of her patient kindness. That afternoon, as he walked through the settlement, he found Lena near a cluster of drying herbs. She wore a simple gray tunic, and her hair was tied back loosely. She lit up with a look of gladness when she saw him approach. Sensing he wanted to speak, she set aside her work, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Thank you for the herbal compresses," he said, holding up the pouch. "I appreciate the extra care." She nodded, a small smile forming. "You push yourself too hard, and I wanted to make sure you had something to ease the aches. Your shoulder is still healing, after all." He found himself suddenly at a loss for words, the weight of the conversation he had had with Talia pressing on him. This was the first time in his life he could recall being nervous to speak. Finally, he swallowed and gestured for her to follow him away from the bustle, toward a quieter corner under a sprawling oak tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. They stood there, a palpable tension humming between them. Lena searched his gaze, sensing his inner conflict. "Is something wrong?" she asked in a gentle tone. He exhaled slowly. "Lena, he began, pausing to gather the right words. "I need to be honest. The pack expects me to mate with Talia. We've trained together since we were cubs, and everyone sees us as the strongest pairing to secure the future. She and I have never made an official commitment, but the assumption is always there." A flicker of sadness passed through Lena's eyes, though she tried to hide it. "I understand," she said softly, dropping her gaze. Rhodri reached out, lightly grazing her hand. "What I'm trying to say is, I realize I have a choice, and it's not an easy one. For the longest time, I never questioned the idea that Talia and I would be together, because I never felt strongly about anyone else. But meeting you, spending time with you, it's made me question everything." He paused, frustration and earnestness warring in his voice. "I don't want to hurt Talia, and I don't want to disappoint the pack, but there's a part of me that—" He struggled to voice the swirling emotion in his chest. Lena inhaled, a mixture of hope and concern playing across her face. I care about you, Rhodri," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'm an Omega caretaker. If you choose me, you're bound to face disapproval. People will question why you didn't pick a warrior who can match your skill in battle." He held her gaze with sudden intensity. "A mate bond isn't just about skill in battle. If that were the only measure, Talia and I would have formed a bond years ago. It's about something deeper, something I can't fully explain. When I'm around you, I feel a calm I've never known. I feel like there's more to life than just fighting." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, her heart hammering. She wanted to throw her arms around him, to speak every tender feeling that had grown in her chest. Yet a swirl of anxiety held her back. The pack hierarchy was not just a formality, it was a lifeblood of their society. What would it mean for the fierce alpha warrior to choose an Omega caretaker over a top-tier she-wolf like Talia? Before either could say more, a low voice interrupted them. Alpha Byron stood a few paces away, his gaze weighty. "Rhodri, caretaker," he greeted, the formal address underscoring the gravity of the moment. "I need to speak with Rhodri alone." Lena nodded, stepping back quickly and hurrying away, leaving Rhodri feeling exposed under the Alpha's discerning gaze. Alpha Byron looked around, ensuring no one else was near. "Come with me," he said, guiding Rhodri toward the Alpha's private quarters behind the main lodge. Inside, a small fire burned in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The Alpha rested his hands on the edge of a wooden table, exhaling heavily. "I've heard the rumors," he began. "Talia tells me you've developed a fondness for the Omega caretaker. She also implies that you're hesitant about fulfilling the expectation of mating with her." Rhodri felt heat rise to his neck, but he kept his posture steady. "That is correct. I won't deny it." Alpha Byron studied him for a long moment, his expression tempered by years of leadership. "I won't say I'm not surprised, or even disappointed. The pack has envisioned you and Talia leading our future generations. But an Alpha must follow his instincts. And if your wolf is calling out for someone else, it's not my place to force a bond that doesn't exist." Relief mingled with tension in Rhodri's chest. "You won't oppose it? Listen. Well," the Alpha said gravely, "I won't stand in your way, but be warned. If you choose this Omega, you must be prepared for dissent. Some will say it weakens our pack's warrior lineage, that your children, should you have any, won't inherit the same fierce drive. Talia is respected by many, and some might resent the caretaker for what they see as a disruption to a strong alliance. You'll need to show unwavering resolve, and you'll need to prove that your choice does not diminish your commitment to the pack's defense." Rhodri breathed slowly, absorbing the Alpha's words. "I understand. I am ready to face whatever comes." Alpha Byron nodded. "Then tell Talia your final decision, and make it public. Stand firm in it. If we are to weather the rogue threats, we cannot afford internal conflict. Settle your personal affairs so the pack has no reason to doubt our saw. Unity." That same afternoon, Talia requested an audience with the Alpha as well, and Rhodri knew the time to reveal his intentions had come. He found Talia in the large communal area where warriors often gathered to share meals. She stood at one end, arms folded, speaking in hushed tones to two other fighters, who quickly excused themselves upon Rhodri's arrival. Talia gestured for him to follow her outside, to a secluded spot behind the lodge. The sky had grown darker since morning, and a rumble of distant thunder hinted at an approaching storm. Talia's stance was stiff, her eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Well?" she asked, voice clipped. "Have you made your decision?" Rhodri clenched his fists, glancing at the scudding clouds above as if searching for resolve. "I have," he said, meeting her gaze. "You've been a comrade, a friend, and a rival in the best sense. But there has never been a true mate bond between us, not for me, at least. I respect you too much to pretend otherwise." She let out a bitter laugh, turning her face away. "So it's the caretaker then? You are willing to give up the future everyone expects of you, of us, for an Omega?" "I'm not giving up on my future or the pack's. I'm stepping into it in the way my wolf leads me," he said, quietly. "If I forced a bond with you, it would be empty. That's not what our pack needs. We lead best when we act from our truest instincts, not out of obligation." Talia closed her eyes, inhaling through her nose as if summoning every ounce of control. "Then you'd better hope your instincts are correct For all our sakes. The pack won't react kindly to this. Many see me as the rightful mate to the greatest warrior. They'll wonder why an Omega caretaker holds your heart, instead of me. She opened her eyes, struggling to maintain her composure. I won't stand in your way, but don't expect me to smile and celebrate. Rhodri nodded, aware that her words held a sharper edge than mere disappointment. She turned abruptly and walked away, shoulders rigid, leaving him feeling the weight of what he had done. Despite the righteousness he felt in his choice, there was no victory in wounding a friend. He spent the rest of the day steeling himself for the whispers that would inevitably spread. Indeed, by nightfall, a hum of rumors had ignited around the settlement. Some warriors looked at him with confusion, or shook their heads in disapproval. Older pack members whispered that this upset years of tradition. The caretaker circle mostly remained silent on the matter, as Omegas were taught to serve the pack rather than question its politics, but even they exchanged nervous glances whenever Rhodri's name arose. Night fell with a gentle patter of rain against the roofs. Lightning flickered in the distance, thunder rolling softly across the hills. Rhodri found himself once again near that small stream behind the caretaker's lodge, seeking the calming effect of running water. He stood under a broad-leafed oak that sheltered him from the rain, the musky scent of damp earth filling his lungs. The sky flashed white for a moment, illuminating the stream in a ghostly sheen. He heard Lena's footsteps before he saw her. She approached quietly, her hair damp from the drizzle, eyes uncertain. She carried a cloak over her arms, and upon seeing him, she offered it. "You'll get soaked," she said softly. He took the cloak and draped it over his shoulders, then looked at her with a weariness that came from more than physical exhaustion. "Everyone knows," he said simply, his voice echoing in the hush of the downpour. "About us, or at least that I've chosen not to mate with Talia." She nodded, her expression worried. "I've heard them talking. They've been talking about me too, wondering what I did to enthrall you." Her cheeks colored slightly, as if the idea of beguiling him with some trick was laughable. "You've done nothing except be yourself," he replied, reaching out to gently tuck a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. The tender gesture was fleeting, but in it, Lena felt a surge of reassurance that shivered through her entire being. Thunder rumbled again, a bit closer this time, and lightning lanced across the sky. The stream swelled slightly with the sudden rainfall. Lena stepped closer, her feet almost touching Rhodri's, and he could sense her trembling, though whether from the cold or from the surge of emotions, he could not be certain. He placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the damp fabric beneath his palm. "I spoke with Alpha Byron," he continued. "He's not opposing my decision, but he warned of the consequences. Talia is furious, and some pack members already blame you for bewitching me away from my duty." A wry smile touched his lips. "They give me more credit for unwavering discipline than I deserve." Lena gazed up at him, biting her lower lip. "Then we have an uphill path ahead of us," she said quietly. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head, leaning in so his forehead nearly touched hers, the only buffer between them being the sound of rain and the hum of tension. "No, I've never felt more certain of anything." Her eyes fluttered shut at his words, relief mixing with fear. It was a precarious situation, a caretaker, Omega, and an alpha warrior, forging a bond that defied the pack's expectations. And though they both sensed the odds stacked against them, neither could deny that something profoundly real pulsed between them, filling the air like electricity before a storm. They stood like that for several minutes, sheltering under the oak, hearts beating in unison. Lightning flashed again, followed by a sharp crack of thunder. The rain intensified, drenching the clearing in a steady curtain of silver. At last, Lena gently took Rhodri's hand and guided him toward the shelter of the caretaker's lodge. Though it felt like crossing a threshold into deeper territory, they both knew they could not remain hidden forever. Inside, the lodge was lit by a few lanterns, shadows dancing on wooden walls lined with shelves of healing supplies. Several cots were set up, but most were empty, as the day's minor injuries had already been tended to. The older caretaker on duty glanced up from sorting herbs, flicked a disapproving look at Rhodri, but said nothing, returning to her task with a scowl. Lena led Rhodri to a smaller side room used for private treatments. A single lantern sat on a table, illuminating a stock of bandages and tinctures. She handed him a dry cloth to wipe the moisture from his face. "We can talk here for a moment," she said softly, tension rising in her voice. He took the cloth, drying off, and noticed how the dampness made her cheeks glow. The flame's light danced in her eyes, which brimmed with concern. "I don't want you caught in the storm of disapproval alone," Rhodri said quietly. "If anyone wants to question my decision, they can come to me directly." Lena nodded, fiddling with the hem of her tunic. "I don't want to be the reason your reputation suffers. You've trained your entire life to be the warrior this pack relies on. My reputation isn't tied to Talia or to an arrangement others want for me," he insisted, stepping closer. "I've always made my own path, earned my station through my own merits. Choosing you doesn't erase that. If anything, it reaffirms that I have the freedom to follow my instincts, to choose with my heart." A lump formed in Lena's throat, a mix of gratitude and an undercurrent of anxiety. She had never felt so conflicted, drawn to Rhodri, as though fate itself had intertwined their destinies, yet terrified of what it might mean for them both in a pack that valued martial prestige above all else. Before she could voice her concerns, someone entered the main door of the lodge, footsteps heavy. A deep voice called out, "Caretaker Lena? Is Rhodri here?" Rhodri recognized the voice as belonging to Bran, a senior warrior often tasked with relaying important messages. Exchanging a quick glance with Lena, he moved to the curtain that separated the side room from the larger area. Bran stood there, water dripping from the hood of his cloak, an urgent look on his face. "There's a situation," Bran said quickly. "Talia and a scouting party were supposed to return by nightfall, but they haven't. We found signs of a struggle near the ravine. Alpha Byron is gathering warriors to conduct a search." Rhodri felt his blood run cold. In spite of everything, Talia was still his comrade, a warrior he had fought beside countless times. "I'll be there immediately," he said, grabbing the cloak from a peg on the wall. He glanced back at Lena, his eyes filled with dread. She stepped forward, concern etched in her features. "Please be careful," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And bring her back safely." He touched her cheek for a fleeting second, as though drawing courage from her presence. "I will," he promised, then turned and followed Bran into the rainy night. Outside, the pack settlement was alive with commotion despite the late hour and the pouring rain. Warriors hurried back and forth, arming themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Alpha Byron stood in the center of the clearing, issuing orders with measured authority. He looked relieved to see Rhodri approach, though worry pinched the corners of his eyes. "We suspect rogues," Alpha Byron said grimly. "Talia's group would have fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered, it seems. We can't afford to lose one of our top warriors." Rhodri suppressed the jolt of fear that struck him at the idea of Talia in mortal danger. Regardless of their differences, she was an irreplaceable force in the pack. He nodded sharply. "Then let's go. Lead me to the signs of the struggle." Accompanied by a small contingent of elite fighters, Rhodri and Alpha Byron sprinted through the forest, guided by the scouts who had discovered the disturbed ground. Rain pelted them, turning the soil into slippery mud, but they pressed on, their werewolf senses honed to track any scent or sign of trespassers. It took nearly half an hour to reach the ravine, where they found snapped branches and deep claw marks scarring the rocks. The acrid tang of fear lingered in the air, along with the unmistakable metallic scent of blood. "Here!" one of the scouts barked, pointing to patches of crimson streaked across the damp leaves. "It's fresh." Rhodri crouched, examining the pattern of footprints. They were forced this way, he deduced, indicating a trail that disappeared into the thicker brush. Without waiting for Alpha Byron's command, he pushed forward, fueled by a mixture of worry and adrenaline. The warriors followed closely, forming a loose semicircle as they advanced deeper into the forest. The thunder grew louder, and lightning revealed fleeting glimpses of twisted branches overhead, like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. Rainwater sluiced down their faces, making it difficult to see clearly, but their heightened senses guided them. Suddenly, a low growl erupted from behind a stand of pines. Rogues, at least 4 of them, leapt into view, drenched and snarling. Rage pulsed through Rhodri's veins as he recognized one of the rogue wolves from the earlier skirmish that had left his shoulder wounded. That rogue met his eyes with a twisted grin, as though relishing the chance for revenge. Battle broke out in a savage blur of movement. Lightning illuminated the shapes of wolves grappling in the mud, claws raking flesh, teeth snapping with lethal precision. Rhodri, half shifted to unleash his enhanced strength, aimed a devastating punch to a rogue's snout. He heard a satisfying crunch as the rogue yelped and recoiled. Another lunged at him from the side, but he twisted away, driving an elbow into its ribs. The pack warriors behind him engaged the other rogues, savage roars filling the storm-lashed night. In the midst of the melee, Rhodri's senses locked onto a faint whimper deeper in the undergrowth. Breaking away from the group, he shouldered past grasping branches, calling Talia's name. His heart thundered when he spotted her crumpled shape near a mossy boulder. She was partially shifted, her arms bearing signs of a fierce struggle, and blood streaked her brow. Her breathing was shallow, eyes half closed. Another rogue hovered above her, jaws parted for a final strike. A growl erupted from Rhodri's throat, and he launched himself with a fury that caught the rogue off guard. They tumbled across the slick ground, grappling in the mud. With a swift pivot, Rhodri sank his claws into the rogue's shoulder, forcing it to howl in pain. Summoning the last vestiges of control, he delivered a knockout blow to the rogue's head, sending it slumping. Panting, Rhodri dropped to his knees beside Talia, checking for a pulse. Relief crashed over him as he felt the faint thrum of her heartbeat. Her eyes flickered open, and she stared at him through the rain, disoriented. "You came," she mumbled, her voice slurred. "Of course," he replied, cradling her head. "Stay still. We'll get you back to the lodge." She gave a weak nod, her expression hovering between gratitude and a pain too deep for words. In that moment, it did not matter what tension lay between them. They were members of the same pack, once childhood friends, forever bound by the loyalty ingrained in every werewolf's soul. The remaining rogues were swiftly subdued by Alpha Byron's contingent, and once the area was secured, Rhodri carried Talia through the downpour. Her breath was ragged, and her injuries were significant, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. By the time they reached the settlement, the caretaker's lodge was already abuzz with Omegas preparing to treat the wounded. Rhodri brought Talia inside, setting her gently onto a cot. As soon as Lena saw Talia's condition, she rushed forward, her eyes keen with professionalism. Even though Talia had resented Lena's presence in Rhodri's life, the caretaker and Lena overrode any personal feelings. She gathered salves, bandages, and clean water to address the warrior's injuries. Rhodri hovered close, wrestling with a torrent of emotions. She'll need stitches for that cut on her arm and some rest for the bruised ribs, Lena announced calmly to the other caretakers. We'll take care of her. Talia, delirious from pain, blinked up at Lena, her voice hardly above a whisper. Thank you. Lena offered a small nod, focusing on cleansing the wound on Talia's temple. Rhodri watched, his heart thudding with conflicting emotions: relief that Talia was safe, admiration for Lena's unwavering compassion, and apprehension over the path that lay ahead. An hour later, Talia was stable. Alpha Byron personally came to the lodge, observing the swirl of caretakers. He gestured for Rhodri to follow him to a quieter corner. You did well, he said, voice lowered. We can't afford to lose her, not now. Rhodri's gaze flicked back to where Talia lay, breathing in shallow but steady intervals. I'm glad we reached her in time. You realize this could stir up more speculation. Some will say you saved Talia. So, perhaps you intend to mate her after all. Others will claim you only rescued her because of your duty to the pack, not out of any deeper bond. The Alpha's eyes rested on Rhodri. Where do you stand? Rhodri straightened, a note of calm resolve coloring his voice. I saved her because she is my comrade, and I refuse to abandon any pack member, let alone a warrior of her caliber. My feelings on the mate bond remain the same. Alpha Byron studied him, then nodded. Very well. Then you must prepare to face the consequences of that choice. Talia is still a pillar of our forces, and if she decides to publicly confront your decision once she's recovered, you'll need to stand firm. Rhodri accepted the Alpha's words. He felt Lena's presence at his side, a comforting warmth against the steady tension of the lodge. He looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. She offered him a small, resolute smile in return. In that moment, he understood that whatever storms they had yet to face from the pack's disapproval, they would weather them together. Lightning continued to flicker across the night sky long after Talia was placed in the care of the Omegas. Rain battered the rooftops until the early hours of morning, and when the storm finally calmed, a damp hush settled over the midnight stone pack. Dawn came with a grayish pall, revealing mud-slick footpaths and puddles that reflected the wan light. Inside the caretaker's lodge, Talia's labored breathing kept many on edge. Although her injuries were significant, the stitchwork and salves applied by Lena and the other caretakers had stabilized her. Rhodri barely slept. He had remained by Talia's side through most of the night, the guilt of their recent arguments weighing on him heavily. Despite everything that had happened between them, he did not wish her any harm. When morning arrived, Lena approached him as he sat near Talia's cot. Her quiet footsteps barely disturbed the lodge's stillness, where other injured warriors rested on nearby cots. She offered him a bowl of warm broth and urged him to eat something, concern evident in her eyes. You will be no use to her or anyone else if you exhaust yourself, she said gently. Rhodri nodded, accepting the bowl. How is she? He asked, directing his gaze to Talia's pale features. She's improving. The bleeding has stopped, and her temperature is normal. The deeper cuts will leave scars, but a warrior like Talia can handle that. She should regain consciousness soon. Lena spoke in a soft but reassuring tone. She sensed Rhodri's inner strain, and though she understood the reasons behind it, she wished he would allow himself some relief. Thank you, Lena, he replied quietly, allowing a tight smile of gratitude to momentarily soften his usually stern features. He finished the broth under her watchful eye. Once he had eaten, Lena prepared a fresh compress for his shoulder. She carefully peeled away the old bandage, her touch practiced, her expression focused. He caught the faint scent of chamomile on her hands. that calming aroma that now reminded him of her presence. "You should rest a little," Lena insisted when she finished replacing his bandage. "Your own wounds might not be as severe as hers, but they still need time to heal." Rhodri knew she was right. Sleep tugged at him, but he resisted for a moment, stealing a glance at Talia's prone form. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Reassured that she was stable, he finally let the fatigue guide him to a nearby chair, where he dozed off, the lodge's soft lantern glow lulling him. He awoke to find Talia's eyes open, watching him across the room. She had managed to shift enough to prop herself against a thin pillow. Their gazes met, and for a moment, neither said a word. Her stare flicked to his freshly tended bandage before drifting to the rest of the lodge, where Lena and the other caretakers worked among the cots. "How do you feel?" Rhodri asked softly, rising from the chair. Talia grimaced, a shadow of her usual strong demeanor. "I've been better," she rasped, then coughed lightly. "At least I'm alive." He nodded, stepping closer. "We found you just in time. What happened out there?" She licked her cracked lips, trying to recall the details. "We were ambushed," she said, voice raw. "I knew we were outnumbered, but we refused to back down. We fought until there was no choice but to retreat, and I got separated from the others." She paused, the memory clearly unsettling. "All I recall after that is darkness and pain." Rhodri listened, anger flaring at the rogue's boldness. Yet even as fury sparked, he felt relief that Talia was here to tell the tale. She studied his face, perhaps expecting him to mention the caretaker issue, but he offered no immediate words on that subject. Lena approached quietly, offering Talia a cup of herbal tea. "This should help with the pain," she said, meeting Talia's eyes with a calm, professional courtesy. Talia regarded her for a moment, a series of conflicted emotions passing over her expression, and then she nodded. While Talia sipped the tea, Lena checked her bandages, explaining in a gentle murmur how each one was helping to close the wounds and prevent infection. Rhodri sensed Talia's initial tension around Lena, but she seemed too drained from her injuries to openly resist the caretaker's help. When Lena finished, Talia let out a weary sigh. "You saved me," Talia said, her voice hardly above a whisper as she looked at Rhodri, then shifted her gaze to Lena. "Or perhaps both of you did." "We do what must be done for the pack," Lena said simply, not seeking credit. She turned away to gather fresh water, giving Talia and Rhodri a little privacy. Talia closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, her stare settled on Rhodri with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "I heard you refused to mate with me, choosing to follow your heart, that caretaker's heart." She swallowed hard, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "I won't pretend it doesn't hurt, but in that ravine, all I could think was that I wanted to survive, for the pack, for the chance to fight another day. My pride is wounded, maybe more than my body, but I can't ignore the truth." Rhodri stood silent, caught between guilt and an odd sense of relief that Talia was confronting the situation. He recalled their many arguments about the future, how it had never felt right to simply accept the pack's assumption about a mate bond. Finally, he found the words. "Talia, I owe you an apology. Not for following my heart, but for not being clear about my feelings sooner. I value you, but what I feel for you is more akin to respect, friendship, loyalty. It was never—" He paused, uncertain how to phrase his lack of deeper affection without wounding her further. "I understand," Talia interjected, the corners of her eyes tightening. "I don't need elaborate justifications. It's enough that you've acknowledged the truth before it drove us both into a miserable arrangement." She turned her head slightly, her gaze landing on Lena, who was busy across the room with another caretaker. "That Omega, is she truly the one you see as your mate?" Rhodri's throat constricted. "Yes," he said quietly, certain of his words. "She may not be a warrior, but she's shown me aspects of life I never allowed myself to see. It's real, Talia. I can't explain it fully, but I know it's there." Talia's face was unreadable for several long beats. Then she nodded, blinking as though grappling with an inward acceptance. "In that ravine, I was sure I was finished. And I realized so much of my drive has always been about proving I was the best. But sometimes, being the strongest isn't about who slashes hardest. It's about surviving to protect the pack that matters to you. If you believe this caretaker can stand by you in spirit, if not in open combat, then I won't stand in your way." An unspoken sense of relief coursed through Rhodri, though a pang of regret for wounding Talia lingered. "Thank you for understanding," he said softly. She lay back, exhaustion pulling at her features. "Leave me be, now. If you want to do something useful, find out more about these rogues. They've become bolder, and we cannot let them keep striking us from the shadows." Rhodri nodded, stepping away. "You focus on getting better. I'll handle the patrols and see to it that we strengthen our defenses." As he turned, he saw Lena quietly waiting by the lodge entrance, as though sensing he might be ready to depart. He walked over, the tension in his shoulders easing at the sight of her. "I'm going to investigate the rogue threat," he told her in a low voice. "Will you stay with her? See that her recovery goes smoothly?" Lena nodded, her eyes reflecting genuine compassion. "Of course. If Talia needs anything, I'll provide it. And, Rhodri, be careful. We don't know if there are more of them out there." He reached out, squeezing her hand in a fleeting gesture, then headed for the exit. The morning rain had ceased, leaving the ground soaked. Warriors milled about, discussing strategies and preparing for another day of vigilance. Rhodri took a moment to scan the settlement, noting which fighters stood ready for immediate deployment. He caught the attention of Bran, the senior warrior who had delivered news of Talia's disappearance. "Any further sightings?" Rhodri asked. Bran shook his head. "Not since last night. Scouts are combing the western and southern borders. We need a plan to stop these rogues from penetrating so deeply into our territory." Rhodri led Bran and a small group of experienced warriors to a sheltered area near the center of the settlement, where a crude map had been laid out on a wooden table. The map depicted the pack's borders, along with known rogue activity sites. Rhodri traced a finger along the western ridge, and then tapped the ravine location. "They took advantage of the storm. Possibly they've got a hideout in the rocky terrain where it's easy to remain undetected." Bran eyed the map. "We can form a scouting party, split into 2 teams. One approaches from the lower valley, the other from the higher pass." Rhodri nodded. "Exactly. We'll corner them if they're still in the area. If they've moved, we'll at least find clues pointing to their next destination." He paused, considering the risk. "Make sure we have enough numbers to handle a potential ambush. No small squads this time." With the plan set, the warriors dispersed to gather supplies, readying themselves for what could become a long trek through the rugged outskirts. Rhodri felt a sense of urgency thrumming in his blood. This rogue threat was more persistent than previous ones. He could not afford to let them strike again, especially not while Talia was incapacitated. Yet, as he prepared to depart, his mind kept drifting to Lena. He tried to shake the thought that leaving her here, exposed to potential danger, was a risk he hated to take. But she was safer within the heart of the pack, guarded by dozens of able fighters. He pushed aside his protective instincts, focusing on the mission ahead. Alpha Byron joined them at the clearing's edge, wearing a cloak to fend off the damp chill. His gaze swept across the assembled warriors with solemn pride. "We cannot allow these rogues to gain a foothold. Let the power of our pack remind them that we are no easy prey." Rhodri bowed his head in respect, then led the column of warriors out of the settlement. Their footsteps tromped through mud and slick leaves as they advanced toward the western boundaries. The early morning light filtered through the thick canopy, where droplets still clung to branches and periodically fell onto the path below. The journey to the ravine took them through the same treacherous ground as before, but this time they spread out in a wider formation, scanning every cranny for signs of hidden enemies. Scouts sniffed the air, searching for the familiar stench of unaligned wolves. Occasionally, they found footprints or tufts of fur snagged on shrubs, but nothing concrete that pointed to a current location. As noon approached, Bran signaled for the party to split into 2 squads per Rhodri's suggestion. Bran led the lower valley route, while Rhodri guided the ascent toward the rocky outcroppings. The climb was arduous, requiring them to navigate slippery boulders and precarious ledges. More than once, someone nearly lost footing on the wet stone, saved only by a comrade's quick reflexes. Eventually, they reached a small plateau overlooking the ravine. The wind whipped around them, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Rhodri motioned for everyone to crouch behind a line of jagged rocks. He could see a cave entrance in the distance, partly hidden by drooping branches. A flicker of movement near that entrance caught his eye. Quietly, he signaled for the warriors to fan out and approach from multiple angles. They advanced in half-shifted forms, claws and fangs at the ready, muscles coiled to spring. As Rhodri closed in on the cave, he heard a low growl emanating from the darkness within. His heart pounded, adrenaline singing through his veins. This was it, the moment they might finally corner the rogue pack. A large wolf darted out, followed by 2 more. They wore the telltale signs of rogues, from their leaner builds and mangy fur to the wild gleam in their eyes. A tense standoff ensued under the half-shadow of the plateau. The rogues snarled, hackles raised, while Rhodri and his comrades surrounded them. "We will not allow you to terrorize our territory any longer," Rhodri growled, half-shifting his vocal cords to convey the menacing rumble of a dominant werewolf. "Surrender now, or we'll show no mercy." One rogue let out a harsh laugh, baring yellowed fangs. "You think you own these lands, with your fancy ranks and rules? We roam free. No pack can stop us." Rhodri's fists clenched. He glanced at his warriors, silently directing them to hold formation. The headstrong approach might push these rogues into a last-ditch attack, but letting them slip away again was unthinkable. The rogues circled, testing for weaknesses in the encirclement. Suddenly, the biggest rogue lunged at one of Rhodri's men, seeking to break the line. Chaos erupted in the narrow space. Teeth gnashed, claws swiped, and bodies collided in a flurry of fur and growls. The warriors held their ground, methodically driving the rogues back toward the cave's mouth. In the melee, Rhodri found himself grappling with the large rogue, their muscled arms locked in a deadly clash. He remembered the savage bite that had nearly cost him weeks ago. Determined not to fall victim again, he summoned every ounce of strength, twisting the rogue's arms behind its back and slamming it against the cavern wall. The impact reverberated, dislodging a rain of pebbles from the cave ceiling. "Yield," Rhodri demanded through gritted teeth, pinning the rogue to the rock. But the wolf only growled, attempting to rake claws across Rhodri's arm. One of Rhodri's comrades moved in to assist, delivering a swift blow that dazed the rogue, and Rhodri used the opening to knock it unconscious. Moments later, the remaining rogues lay subdued. 2 were unconscious from the fierce battle, while 1 clutched a wounded leg, whimpering in a corner. A wave of triumph pulsed through Rhodri, though he remained alert, scanning for any signs of further threats within the cave. He motioned for a few warriors to search the interior. Bran's voice came from outside as he and his squad climbed up the slope, drawn by the sounds of conflict. He observed the battered rogues, then nodded at Rhodri. "Looks like you've cornered them." Rhodri exhaled. "We need to tie them up and bring them before Alpha Byron. He'll decide their fate. At the very least, we can extract information on whether they have more allies lurking nearby." Several warriors set to work binding the rogues with sturdy ropes. The one with the wounded leg spat and hissed, but eventually it grew too weak to resist. With the immediate threat subdued, Rhodri ventured into the cave with Bran, using a torch to illuminate the passage. Inside, they found a makeshift den, scattered with bones, scraps of cloth, and the faint odor of decay. Perhaps a half-dozen rogues had been sheltering here, though only 3 remained to fight. Once the area was thoroughly inspected, Rhodri led the group back toward the pack settlement, dragging the bound rogues. The journey was slow, each step fraught with caution, but eventually they arrived at the perimeter, where a guard detail awaited them. Word spread quickly that the Alpha warrior and his squad had returned with prisoners. A crowd formed in the main clearing, curiosity and anger buzzing among the onlookers. The rogues were taken to a secure storage shed typically used for quarantining feral wolves or criminals awaiting judgment. Alpha Byron emerged, flanked by 2 elders. He looked upon the rogues with a mixture of contempt and relief. "Well done," he told Rhodri and the warriors. "We'll question them. Hopefully, we can put an end to these incursions once and for all." While the Alpha and Elders organized the interrogation, Rhodri slipped away, exhaustion weighing on him. His body ached, bruises throbbing in places he had barely noticed during the heat of combat. Despite the pain, his priority was to check on Talia and see Lena again. He found Lena outside the caretaker's lodge, draping damp linens over a low fence to dry in the patchy afternoon sun. She looked up as he approached, her features lighting with relief when she saw he was safe. Setting aside the linens, she hurried over. "Thank the spirits, you're unharmed," she said, her voice trembling with both concern and joy. Without hesitation, she lifted a hand to cup his cheek, as if needing tangible proof he had returned whole. He leaned into her touch for a moment, letting the warmth of her palm melt away the tension. "We found them," he murmured, giving her a concise rundown of the fight. 3 rogues are captured. The rest must have fled or been killed in the earlier skirmish. Lena listened intently, then ushered him into the lodge, where she insisted on examining his bruises. He complied, removing his torn shirt to reveal fresh scrapes and purple blotches along his arms and chest. She set about cleaning them with warm water and a soothing balm, her touch careful yet assured. In one corner of the lodge, Talia was awake, quietly conversing with another caretaker who adjusted her bandages. Talia spotted Rhodri and Lena together, and though a flicker of something akin to melancholy or regret crossed her features, she quickly masked it. She was a warrior at heart, someone who would not openly display vulnerability. Lena's soothing care lulled Rhodri into a calmer state. The tension seeped from his body as she applied salves, wrapped smaller cuts, and ensured that nothing was seriously injured. "You'll be sore for a while, but no serious wounds this time," she murmured with relief. He smiled faintly, catching her hand as she finished. The lodge was quieter now, with fewer immediate emergencies. "I owe you more thanks than I can express," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "You always take care of me, of all of us, without hesitation." She dropped her gaze, a subtle blush creeping over her cheeks. "It's my calling. And you are important to me, to this pack, but to me personally as well." He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, wishing he could halt time in that moment. The world outside was fraught with challenges, expectations, and potential conflicts, but here, in Lena's presence, he felt the closest thing to contentment he had ever known. Before he could speak further, Talia's caretaker stepped away, leaving her resting on her cot. Talia beckoned Rhodri with a nod, indicating she wanted a word. He cast Lena a quick apologetic glance and moved over to Talia's side. Her gaze flicked between him and Lena, her voice lowered so no one else would hear. "Seems like you handled the rogue threat." He nodded, settling onto a small stool near her cot. "We brought 3 of them back in chains. Alpha Byron will see to the rest." She studied his face. "And you? Are you truly set on forging a mate bond with that Omega?" Her tone held less accusation now, more curiosity, or perhaps acceptance. He inhaled slowly. "Yes, but I'm aware it might cause rifts in the pack. I'm ready to face them." Talia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you'd better make it official. The pack won't linger in doubt forever. And if this is the path you choose, they'll expect you to defend that choice." He leaned in. "I will, but your support would help. You're respected by everyone here." She looked away, pain briefly overshadowing her features. Then she nodded. "Once I'm fully recovered, I'll speak to the elders if it comes to that. The pack can't afford infighting, especially now. If you can prove that choosing a caretaker doesn't diminish your role, they may come to see reason." A surge of gratitude filled Rhodri. "Thank you." She lay back against the pillow, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "Go on then. I need to rest." He stood, casting one more glance at Talia's bandaged form. The truce between them felt fragile but real. A chance for their pack to move forward without the chains of misguided expectation. Chapter 4. Over the next week, Talia's health improved steadily, bolstered by the meticulous care of Lena and the other Omegas. Rhodri split his time between pack duties and checking in on Talia's recovery. The captured rogues were questioned rigorously, revealing bits and pieces of their motives. They admitted to roaming in search of weaknesses among various packs, hoping to carve out territory of their own. Some rogues had scattered, but without a strong leader to unify them, their threat to the Midnight Stone pack would wane. Once Talia was well enough to walk without assistance, she demanded to leave the lodge. Lena insisted she keep her bandages on and avoid extensive strain, but Talia's warrior spirit refused to remain confined any longer. The day Talia stepped out into the main clearing under her own power, numerous pack members greeted her with relieved smiles and congratulatory nods for surviving her ordeal. That same afternoon, Alpha Byron convened a gathering of the elders in the central meeting hall. It was a wide, domed structure made of timber and stone, adorned with carved symbols representing the pack's history. Although pack members generally were not permitted inside during such elder councils, Rhodri and Talia were invited, given the subject at hand. Rhodri arrived in a clean tunic, hair still damp from a hurried wash, accompanied by Talia, who moved gingerly but showed no sign of backing down. Alpha Byron stood at the head of a long table, where the elders' wolves of advanced years, bearing wisdom etched into their lined faces, were seated. Their gazes flicked to Talia's injuries, then to Rhodri's imposing stature. Murmurs passed among them. speculation rife. When silence settled, Alpha Byron spoke, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned leader. We gather to address matters critical to our pack's future. The rogue threat is largely contained, thanks to the swift action of our warriors. Yet one issue remains unresolved and weighs on the minds of many. The potential mate bond between our fiercest warrior, Rhodri, and the esteemed she-wolf Talia. We must clarify their intentions for the good of all. Talia cleared her throat, stepping forward despite the obvious discomfort it caused her. She raised her chin, meeting the gazes of the elders. I speak now to inform everyone that Rhodri and I have decided not to form a mate bond. We respect each other as warriors, but the deeper connection of true mates does not exist between us. It would be a disservice to Growl, the pack, to pretend otherwise. A ripple of startled whispers moved through the elders. One of them, a wiry man with a patch over one eye, raised a hand. Are we to assume, then, that Rhodri chooses to remain unmated? This is unusual for an alpha warrior with his standing. Alpha Byron looked to Rhodri, prompting him to address the council. Rhodri took a measured breath, stepping beside Talia. I choose to forge a mate bond with Lena, the Omega caretaker. I know it defies tradition, but my wolf and my heart are certain. Another elder, her voice raspy with age, shook her head. This is highly irregular. A caretaker? That diminishes the warrior bloodline. We have always prided ourselves on strength in combat. What can an Omega caretaker possibly contribute to ensure the next generation remains powerful? Rhodri balled his fists at his sides, controlling his temper. He was about to respond when Talia placed a hand lightly on his arm, signaling she would speak first. She addressed the elder directly. Is brute strength the only measure of our pack's survival? Have we not lost enough warriors to battles, rogues, and pointless feuds in the past? Perhaps there is a strength in compassion, healing, and resilience that we have overlooked. The elders exchanged skeptical glances. Another council member, an elderly she-wolf with silver hair cascading down her shoulders, asked Talia, You were almost killed, child. Do you not wish to see your might passed on through strong offspring? Talia squared her shoulders. I do want the pack to remain strong, but I also realize that forcing a union without a genuine bond leads to bitterness and division. Rhodri and I are living proof of that. He and Lena share a connection that isn't found through arranged necessity, but through true affinity. That kind of bond can create a different legacy, one grounded in both might and compassion. Alpha Byron stepped in, calm yet firm. I have watched Rhodri defend this pack countless times. He has never faltered in his duty. If he believes this Omega caretaker will not weaken him or the pack, then we owe it to him and to her too. See what they can accomplish. We cannot cling blindly to tradition if it means undermining the happiness and unity of our future. A fraught silence followed. Some elders mumbled about the sanctity of warrior lineages, while others appeared thoughtful, perhaps swayed by Talia's words and the Alpha's stance. The final say, however, lay with the entire council, and they asked for time to deliberate. Rhodri and Talia were dismissed from the chamber while the elders remained to confer. Outside, they found Lena waiting anxiously by the meeting hall's entrance. She had been barred from entering, in accordance with tradition, but her face was taut with worry. Rhodri went to her side and filled her in on what had transpired, how Talia had spoken up in defense of their bond. Lena blinked, surprised. She glanced at Talia, who stood a short distance away. Talia caught Lena's gaze and managed a small nod, her expression complex. Lena approached, her posture hesitant. I appreciate that you stood up for us, she murmured. Talia shrugged, but a faint smile tugged at her lips. You're good at what you do. You saved my life and many others. If Rhodri sees something in you that completes him, I suppose that's not for me to deny. Just keep him in line, caretaker. He can be reckless. Lena swallowed back a tremulous laugh. I'll do my best. They waited in tense silence for what felt like an eternity, until Alpha Byron emerged from the hall, a solemn look on his face. He signaled for Rhodri and Lena to step inside, Talia following behind them. The elders were still seated, their faces laden with varying degrees of resignation, curiosity, and cautious acceptance. The elder with the eye patch spoke first. We have reached a decision. While this union is against the old customs, we acknowledge that times may be changing, and that forcing an unwanted bond has never led to prosperity. Therefore, by majority agreement, we will allow Rhodri to officially mate with Lena, provided that both vow continued loyalty and service to the pack. If any sign arises that this union weakens our borders, we will revisit the matter. A wave of relief coursed through Rhodri. He clasped Lena's hand, feeling the tremor in her grip. The tension in the hall was palpable, but he could sense a current of acceptance, a grudging willingness to give them a chance. Talia stood off to the side, arms folded, watching with a guarded but not unfriendly expression. Alpha Byron placed a hand on Rhodri's shoulder and offered Lena a nod of respect. The crowd outside, having gathered in curiosity, erupted in hushed chatter when Rhodri and Lena emerged with the Alpha and Talia. Some expressions were warm, while others looked uncertain. The disapproval from a few corners was evident in their scowls, but no one openly challenged the Alpha's verdict. That evening, under the glow of torchlight, the pack assembled around the large communal fire pit for a celebration that took shape more out of relief than pure joy. The rogues were no longer an imminent threat. Talia was on the mend, and the tension that had hovered over the matter of Rhodri's mate bond was finally lifted. Meat roasted over open flames, and the air filled with the sense of sizzling fat and spiced seasonings. Children scampered about, chasing each other in playful half-shifts, their laughter echoing in the night air. Older wolves gathered in small clusters, some recounting old battles, others quietly discussing the new arrangement. At the heart of it all, Rhodri and Lena stood side by side, uncertain how to navigate this sudden shift in attention. A caretaker and an alpha warrior, such a match had rarely, if ever, been celebrated openly in the pack's history. Lena felt her heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety. Rhodri sensed her nerves and gently wrapped an arm around her waist. She leaned against him, drawing courage from his steady presence. Talia approached them, moving slowly to favor her wounded side. She cleared her throat. I won't stay long. I'm still supposed to be resting. But I wanted to say, take care of each other. We need both of you at your best. Rhodri inclined his head. Thank you, Talia. Your support means more than you know. She gave a short nod, then turned, disappearing into the crowd. Lena gazed after her, a pang of sympathy stirring in her heart. She understood the complexity of Talia's emotions, but also realized that Talia was resilient and that she would not allow regret to consume her. Soon after, Alpha Byron addressed the pack with a brief speech. He praised the bravery of the warriors who had subdued the rogues, acknowledged Talia's unwavering fortitude, and congratulated Rhodri and Lena on their acceptance by the council. His voice resonated through the clearing, each word carefully chosen to assure the pack that unity was paramount, regardless of the unconventional nature of the new mate bond. A smattering of howls rose from the crowd, a sign of collective acknowledgement. Late into the night, the communal fire burned low, and many had slipped away to their huts. Rhodri and Lena found themselves alone near the dwindling embers. the glow casting dancing shadows on the ground at their feet. He reached out, lacing his fingers through hers, a contented smile curving his lips. "We have a lot of work ahead," Lena murmured. "Some in the pack remain skeptical, and the responsibilities of caring for them won't diminish." He squeezed her hand gently. "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll handle it together." She leaned her head against his shoulder, inhaling the lingering scent of smoke and pine. Above them, the night sky shimmered with stars, now clear after the recent storms. Rhodri pressed his lips to her temple, and her eyes slid shut, savoring the moment of tranquility. For a pack that had long relied on hierarchy and warrior prowess, this quiet melding of compassion and strength felt like the dawn of a new era. In the days and weeks that followed, life continued at its customary pace, yet subtle changes rippled through the Midnight Stone pack. Talia resumed training, more driven than ever, but also more inclined to value the strategic importance of the caretaker circle. She never spoke openly of regrets, but her renewed fervor for shaping new warriors hinted at an inner acceptance. The elders, while still a bit wary, witnessed Rhodri fulfilling his duties without falter. Now supported by Lena's healing knowledge and gentle guidance, slowly, the novelty of their bond settled into an unspoken norm. Rhodri still led border patrols, sometimes joined by Talia, other times by Bran or other senior warriors. He pushed himself, determined to prove that choosing a caretaker did not lessen his ferocity or dedication. Each time he returned to the village, caked in mud or dust from long treks, Lena would meet him with a tender smile and a basin of warm water to wash away the grime. They shared quiet nights by the stream, relishing stolen moments of closeness. One moonlit evening, after another successful patrol, Rhodri found Lena waiting for him under the oak tree, where they had first spoken openly about their feelings. The tree's broad canopy shimmered with fireflies, their lights pulsing in gentle patterns. Lena wore a simple dress, her hair unbound, and she held a small bouquet of lavender, gathered from the caretaker's garden. She offered it to him with a shy smile. "You've been working so hard," she said softly. "I wanted to give you a small reminder of calm." His heart stirred at her thoughtfulness. He brushed his fingers over the purple blooms. "You are my reminder of calm, Lena," he replied, voice hushed. They settled onto a patch of soft grass, leaning against the oak's trunk. The night air was balmy, carrying the distant murmurs of pack members settling in for the night. Rhodri turned to face her, quiet intensity radiating from his gaze. "I'm grateful for everything you've brought into my life," he began, voice trembling slightly. "Before you, I only saw my worth in battles won and enemies defeated. You made me realize there's another side to living, one that values healing, compassion, and genuine connection." She slid her hand into his, her eyes glistening. "I never imagined I'd find myself here, with the pack's fiercest warrior, being accepted as his mate. But you made me see that I can yearn for more, that I'm not bound to a life of quietly watching from the background." He lifted her hand, brushing his lips across her knuckles, heart pounding with profound emotion. "When I look back at the day I first stumbled into the lodge, wounded, it's almost as if fate planned it." They sat under that oak tree for a long time, speaking in hushed tones about the future. They envisioned a pack that merged healing and strength, where warriors understood the power of empathy, and caretakers felt emboldened to step beyond the shadows. They dared to imagine a lineage that might inherit both fortitude and compassion, forging a stronger unity than any purely martial bloodline could achieve. Eventually, the moon rose high, bathing the forest in silver light. They returned to the village, hand in hand, passing by the lodges where quiet voices and soft laughter spoke of a community at peace for the moment. As they parted ways for the night, Rhodri hesitated, then leaned in, pressing his lips against hers with careful tenderness. It was a kiss laden with promise, acceptance, and the electric thrill of a shared destiny. Lena's cheeks warmed, and she savored the contact, her pulse alive with excitement. In the following weeks, the pack weathered minor squabbles with stray wolves, overcame small disputes among the ranks, and carried on with daily routines. Rhodri and Lena gradually fell into a comfortable rhythm, their bond solidifying through shared tasks. Him sparring with new recruits, her tending to scrapes and bruises, both occasionally advising Talia on nuanced methods for combining strategy with care. The respect Talia and Rhodri had always held for each other evolved into a camaraderie that transcended their earlier rivalry. Lena's healing circle grew more confident under her calm leadership, knowing that their role was validated by the newly recognized mate bond. One evening, near the time the next full moon was set to rise, the pack gathered again at the communal fire pit. This time, no crisis or pressing threat loomed. Instead, the air was filled with quiet celebration. Music drifted from a simple drum beat, accompanied by the occasional hum of an elder's chant. Pups darted in and out of the firelight, squealing in delight when a warrior pretended to chase them. It was a scene of unity and hope. Amid the soft glow of the flames, Rhodri and Lena exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They rose from their seats, stepping into the heart of the gathering. A hush fell over the group as they realized the couple wanted to speak. Rhodri cleared his throat, shifting a bit uneasily. Though revered for his prowess, public speaking did not come naturally to him. "Everyone," he began, voice steady but tinged with a hint of nerves. "I stand before you not just as an alpha warrior, but as a member of this pack who has found a mate that completes me in ways I never expected. Lena has shown me a form of strength that does not rely on claws or fangs, but on compassion and wisdom." He paused, searching for the right words. "We have chosen to face life's battles together, to guide this pack into a future where healers and warriors stand side by side." Lena, cheeks flushed from the attention, took a small step forward. She let her gaze travel around the circle, meeting the eyes of several elders, warriors, and omegas who had once doubted or feared her influence. "Thank you for welcoming me as Rhodri's mate, even if it was difficult for some to accept at first. I promise to uphold my duties as caretaker and to support every member of this pack in times of hurt or hardship. Hope to also learn from you all, as this new role is something I never dreamed possible." A wave of murmurs passed through the crowd, some approving, others tentative. Then a lone howl echoed across the clearing. It was Talia, stepping forward from the shadows at the edge. She gazed at Rhodri and Lena with an unreadable expression, then lifted her face to the sky and howled again. Her cry was deep and resonant, carrying layers of acceptance and perhaps a pang of longing. Several more warriors joined in, their voices harmonizing in a haunting chorus. Gradually, the entire pack took up the howl, forging a tapestry of sound that surged through the night air. Rhodri's heart pounded in time with the echoes around him. Lena's eyes misted as she clutched his hand. This was the pack's acknowledgement maybe, not pure celebration, but recognition and unity. The howls dwindled into the night, leaving a charged silence. Then Talia approached, placing one hand on Rhodri's shoulder and the other on Lena's. She did not speak, but the gesture said everything that needed to be communicated: acceptance and respect. As the fire crackled in the center of the clearing, the pack gathered closer, some offering pats on Rhodri's back, others gifting Lena small tokens of welcome. Elders nodded in approval, while Omegas bowed graciously, acknowledging one of their own who had stepped into a higher station. The tension that had once lingered around them softened, replaced by a cautious optimism that perhaps the pack could evolve without losing its core identity. That night, as the moon rose high above the treetops, Rhodri and Lena walked side by side through the quiet paths leading to their shared future. In every hush of the wind through the pines, and in every distant howl echoing through the valleys, they felt the stirring of a new era for the Midnight Stone Pack, a union born not solely of duty or tradition, but of genuine connection, promising a legacy that could be both powerful and kind,